8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Hello, everybody. Yes, I am happy to be here with you. This is Michael Voss, and we are on the Exceptional Conservative Network, joining you for the 200th episode of No Soundbites Allowed, the podcast, the video cast, here with you, enjoying my time with you. Guys, I have to tell you, there is nothing better that I do, nothing better than I have to do every week than speak with you. I enjoy this, and I thank you, each and every one of you. You guys make it, you're the best. You really are the best audience out there, and I enjoy it. And I'm just so happy to be here with you and to be able to say that I'm having my 200th podcast. And I want to stop for a second because the first thing I want to do, this is the Memorial Day weekend, and so I want to take a moment just to celebrate a little bit about Memorial Day. Now, this is something from Facebook. For those who are on the audio of the podcast, you won't be able to see the show. What you're seeing on the screen right now is what is the difference? I hear this all the time. What's the difference between Armed Forces Day, Veterans Day, and Memorial Day? People get them confused a lot. Well, let's make it easy. The third Saturday of May for each year is Armed Forces Day. And for those who are currently wearing the uniform, for those who are active military, that's Armed Forces Day, our active military. Veterans Day is obviously for those who are no longer actively in our military. People like members of my family, really great heroes, people I've talked to all across the world, people like Lee Spinner, hey Lee, I know you're out there, and so many others of my friends and family who have served but are no longer in uniform, including you, Francine, my sister. And then there's Memorial Day, which we are celebrating now. Oh, by the way, Veterans Day, again, is on November 11th, one day after the Marine Corps birthday, which is November 10th. A great day, and Marines across the world, remember, that is our second birthday, November 10th. But Memorial Day is the last Monday of May, which usually winds up like the 28th, 29th, 30th, right in there. But more importantly, Memorial Day is for those who served and died for us. Those who, as the meme, as the message on Facebook shows in the image, it's for those who never made it out of the uniform, for those who have served and given the ultimate sacrifice for our nation, for everything that we have and everything that we are. And that's the difference between those days. And a lot of people mix that up because it's a lot about veterans, but it's a celebration of all of them. And as I mentioned in my previous podcast, we saw that Memorial Day started about 1868. It was a reaction to the 1865, the Civil War, and it was started, some dispute it, but it seems to have been started down in Charleston, South Carolina, when we had the black troops that had served in the Civil War were memorializing and remembering all of the soldiers that died in the Civil War. And then from there, it just grew beyond. Not that there haven't always been remembrances of those who passed in wars and conflicts around the world throughout all of history, but that's when it became more formally and more annualized here in the United States. So I wanted to share that because I think it's important to remember, how did we get here? How did we get here? And what this weekend is supposed to be about. And I think it's important to remember what this weekend is supposed to be about. And as you know in the show, we always like to do every week, and sometimes more than once in a week, but definitely in every week, we try to do a Game of Thrones shame. Something, the worst kind of shame. And I continue to say, for this week, in every episode we try and do something different, but this week I want to go back to and continue to say, it's the Federal Bureau of Prisons. Shame on you. Shame on you, Federal Bureau of Prisons, because you did the wrong thing here. You guys are so wrong in that they allowed I don't even have the word for this guy, the criminal, the horrible Taliban American, John Lind, is being released early. You may have seen this in my prior podcast when I spoke about John Lind, and he's the guy who actively joined the Taliban to fight against American soldiers. He was complicit in having Americans killed in that fight. And when he was caught, he's been convicted. It's treason. He's lucky he didn't get shot for it. He is a horrible individual. He was sentenced to 20 years. I believe the death penalty would have applied and should have. He's being released early after serving 17 years and 5 months. But he's being released early, and he's going to be traveling to Virginia. And it really aggravates me massively. I cannot explain how angry that makes me that John Lind is going to be released and going free when so many others are not. And he was complicit in making sure that some of those people cannot come back home. On Memorial Day weekend, at a time when we are remembering so many people from the Civil War, World War II, World War I, from the Korean War, Vietnam War, Afghanistan, Iraq. Think of all those individuals, tens of thousands of Americans who have served and died, never to come back home for our nation. And whether you think our nation has flaws or not, and it does, because everything human has flaws, to release on this weekend, especially on this weekend, to release John Lind is insulting. And I don't understand why we're seeing the Federal Bureau of Prisons releasing this individual early and on Memorial Day weekend. And by the way, as I mentioned in a prior podcast, John Lind is unrepentant. This has been reported by several news agencies, not just one, several agencies over the time that he has been in prison have said he has not repented. He still is a Taliban. He still wants to destroy and kill Americans in service of his fanatical religious views. That is a problem. I have a problem with anyone who has a fanatical religious view. It doesn't matter what religion it may be. All religions, when you have a fanatical religious individual, they are dangerous. This one in particular has sworn to destroy America, its very existence. We hear this from Iran on a regular basis, the greatest source of funding of terror in the world. The number one funding of terrorism in the world, targeted against the United States. They have repeatedly said so. They continue to say so, even during the Iran nuclear deal. Even as President Obama and John Kerry were speaking about how great the Iran nuclear deal was, we heard Iran saying, no, it's death to America. We're going to kill America. And the Iran nuclear deal is just a pause in the process of removing America from the face of the earth. That is troubling. I don't know how you make a deal with people who are swearing to your face that they're going to kill you. And I want to be very clear. That's Democrats, that's progressives, that's conservatives, liberals, libertarians, Republicans. It doesn't matter who you are. If you are American, they want to kill you. Period. They don't make a distinction on your political preferences. They don't care. Well, actually, they do care if you're transgender. They want to kill you faster. If you're gay, they want to kill you faster. But they want to kill us all because we are Americans and they do not agree with our existence. So every time I hear someone talking about the Iran nuclear deal and it was so great and why are we getting rid of it? And oh my God, now Iran is they're shooting off missiles. John Bolton's mentioning this week how they're violating the treaty sanctions that they were not supposed to be, they were supposed to be prohibited from being able to develop new missiles, not part of the Iran nuclear deal. That's a separate issue because that Iran nuclear deal didn't address their missile testing, which is what they're trying to figure out. How to get a bomb, a nuclear bomb, a chemical bomb into the United States from Iran. They're trying to get intercontinental ballistic weapons, ICBMs. That's what they've been working on. They don't need a nuke if they can't get the missile here, and they haven't been able to. That's what they've been working on. And that's what they're working on right now. And that's what the Iran nuclear deal helped fund. Let's remember that. The Iran nuclear deal, I did a lot of articles about this. You can go over to the mvass.com, the MVAS site, that's the Voss political commentary site, and put in Iran nuclear deal. I've done a lot of articles on it. I've been following it for a long time. They have been figuring out how to get a bomb to kill Americans, and that's why they took the pause, because it doesn't matter if they have a nuclear bomb if they can't get it here. These guys are troubling, they are dangerous, and someone who believes in their fundamental views of the Ayatollah Khomeini, that America, all of America must die. When you have that, and that American Taliban, John Lind, believes in that, and you release him on Memorial Day, I'm sorry, that is insulting. That is aggravating. It makes me very upset. It pisses me off. It really does. And it should. It should upset all of us. I don't care that he wants to go to Virginia. He's going to go into seclusion and hiding. I don't care that, some people say, well, he served his time. Treason doesn't have a time limit, especially when you are unrepentant. I mean, that's the big difference here. Unrepentant. It's one thing if he had repented truly and honestly and sincerely and wanted to make better of his life. I work with many nonprofits. One of them in particular is about giving people who have repented for their crimes and are trying to reintegrate themselves into society and to be beneficial and positive sources, individuals that want to give back to their community and to make up and do better in their lives, make up for the crimes they committed and do better in their lives. I have a nonprofit. There's a nonprofit that I work with specifically for that. So don't tell me that, you just hate everyone. No, they have repented. They have honestly repented. This isn't contrition. This isn't just some kind of show to make sure that people will release them from prison so they can go back to their lives that they had before and continue what they did before. That's different. I don't have pity for that. Help those who want to help themselves. Help those who are trying to better themselves. Absolutely. But when we have someone who's unrepentant, like John Lind, there's a problem. And guess what, America? He's not the only one. We have about a dozen individuals who have been, in some way, they have committed treason, they have been convicted of treason since 2001, since 9/11, that are in prisons and are looking at, within the next 5 years, they're going to be up for release into America because we don't have the death penalty for treason anymore. And they're going to be released into the general population. And it seems that these individuals, these traitors, they have committed treason against the United States. They have either successfully or attempted to kill Americans for the purpose of destroying this nation. And they are all planning to come out of prison. And the best answer we have at this moment, like with John Lind, is that the government will monitor their internet actions for 3 years. They'll keep an eye on them for 3 years. They'll have a little monitor badge. So for the rest of his time that he would have served, he's going to have the ankle bracelet. We'll track him. And then what? And then what happens? What happens the day that the ankle bracelet goes off and the government stops, quote unquote, stops looking at his computers and what he's saying and who he's messaging and what he's planning? What about the others? It's a very troubling question. It's a very troubling question. And there is no good answers. And because there are no good answers and because we don't have a plan for that, I have to say shame on the Federal Bureau of Prisons for releasing this individual without having a plan, without being sure that they're protecting America, without knowing for sure that this is the best thing to do, and absolutely because this is the wrong weekend to do it. But that's my thoughts. You may disagree. And by the way, for the show, this is our 200th episode, and I'm enjoying being here with you. Please remember, you can check out the commentary. You can go over to our chat room. You can reach us. We're checking everything on Facebook. We're checking on Twitter. The Twitter is MV Consult, and you can reach us there. And I hope everyone is having a really good weekend, separate of everything I've just discussed. But I do hope everyone's having a good weekend with friends and family, that you're able to remember and celebrate what we have been given at the cost of blood and sweat and lives, not just those that have died, but those who continue to suffer with PTSD or various injuries that they may have received because they served our nation to the ultimate level. And I know many friends like that, and to each of them, I say thank you. Thank you for the service that you did, for the time that you spent in active warfare, which I did not. I did serve in the military, but I did not serve in active warfare. And I do want to say to all of my colleagues, those who have served, my friends, all of you, thank you. Thank you. You give me the opportunity to be here, to be able to have these conversations without being shot by some Gestapo secret police. I thank you for allowing me to be able to have a home, to have electricity, to live a life that is so envied around the world that we have millions of people who are trying to illegally enter our nation to be part of it. Let's think about that for a second. We hear a lot of people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Bernie Sanders, pretty much all of the Democratic 2020 candidates. They want to tell us how bad America is, that we have to change America, that there's a problem with America. And they seem to forget that America, which they think is completely wrong and needs to be completely revamped, is the place that tens of millions, not a million, not hundreds of thousands, tens of millions of people have come to and continue to come to because it is the best place in the world. They travel from overseas. They cross oceans. They cross thousands of miles of inhospitable and dangerous land to come into our nation, legally and illegally, every year. Every year. They're doing it right now. We have more people trying to get into this nation. It's crisis, and that's beyond crisis levels. It's been crisis. It's beyond crisis levels of individuals trying to enter our nation because of the blood, the sweat, the tears, the PTSD, the injuries that so many people have received to ensure that we are the greatest nation on the earth. And we are. Do not be fooled by slogans, ads, cheerful, bright-eyed, doleful little members of Congress. We are the greatest nation on this planet as we exist right now. Do we have flaws? Of course we do. I don't know anything created by human beings that doesn't have flaws. Anything that deals with human beings talking to another human being, I don't know anything that doesn't have flaws. Of course we are flawed. Of course the world is flawed. But given those flaws, does it get better than America? No, it does not. I do not see millions of people. I don't see hundreds. There's definitely not thousands. There's not even hundreds of people who are trying to enter Venezuela or to enter Cuba or to go to the USSR, Russia, or communist China or North Korea. You don't see people trying to give up their citizenship and join those nations because they're so great. You don't. That's just a fact. But you have millions who are trying to get into America. It says something. And it's because of those who have served and given the greatest of sacrifices. And we should remember that this weekend. I do. I remember it every day. I can't do what I do without those sacrifices. So I thank them. And so, yes, my 200th episode is about freedom. It's about respecting and thanking that service that we have received. And I think it's important. But there's a lot of things I do want to get into. And at 1 o'clock, we will have our guest coming in. And let me tell you a little bit about our guest, because I would just want to take a quick break and talk to him about him. In our 200th episode, our guest is Dr. Giovanni Scaringi. Now, he's a friend of mine. We've been talking for years. I met him back when he was on the campaign trail. He's a city councilman for the city of Binghamton, New York. I met him when he was campaigning and trying to get in there. He's a Republican, and we have a lot of similar views. He actually is a professor of economics. He teaches over at SUNY Broome and SUNY Binghamton, Binghamton University in the region. He's known as a tough but fair professor, but he's also a city councilman, and he's so much more. And he's a great friend. I enjoy him. He was our first guest on No Soundbites Allowed. Okay, before we were the Exceptional Conservative Network, before anyone knew about it, back before we had any of the equipment we had here, when we were just figuring out how to actually even make a podcast, we got Dr. Giovanni Scaringi. He came on. He did us the favor, and he was very kind. One of the first politicians, and the first interview, and the first politician to come on and speak with us and talk about all the things that were affecting people. It was a great conversation. I think we spoke for 2 hours at the time, just covering everything. And so I couldn't think of someone better to have back for episode 200 to talk about the things that have changed in over 3.5 years, 4 years, all the things that have changed in the world. That it'll be great to see his perspective. And it's also one of the most popular of our interviews. And we've had a lot of very popular interviews. We've had interviews with Heather L. Micha. She, one of our top interviews there as well. And she's a small businesswoman, a mom, who's putting on the Harmony event here upcoming in about a month in the Binghamton Southern Tier region to help children who are suffering because of the addictions of their parents, whether it's alcohol, opioids, drugs, doesn't matter. And so that's also another one of our popular ones. Matter of fact, I was looking back over time at just all the different things that we've done on the show, the different subjects that we've covered. And it's kind of interesting that some of the most popular episodes we have ever had deal with the transition of President Trump into power and the backlash, the emotional reaction from the far left, the corruption that we saw take place in the 2016 election year. That's, Donna Brazile giving away questions to prep Hillary Clinton, the fact that Senator Sanders could not win because the race was rigged against him. Literally, factually, Democrats rigged the election against him, and yet her candidate lost. And all of how that all impacted America, and talking about that in 2016. Talking about Representative Anthony Brindisi back when he was still the assemblyman for New York and the Utica Hospital. And that scandal up in Utica Hospital, where we saw that, and we see currently that eminent domain is being used as a weapon of the political process created by a handful of people, including Anthony Picenti, the county executive up in Utica, and also Anthony Brindisi, then the assemblyman, now a congressman for the New York 22nd District, and how they arranged and through backdoor deals created a circumstance that doesn't help anyone, that literally was out there to hurt the public. But that's what he did. And so that was a great article. And we were talking, and of course, talking about the absurdity back in just February of last year, in 2018, talking about the absurdity of laws for gun control that have failed, continued to fail the public. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And of course, there's also my coverage of CPAC and many of the interviews I did at CPAC, which is the Conservative Political Action Conference of 2019. And I will be going back in 2020. But we had a lot of interviews there, very popular. Great time speaking with people like Eric Caron, Claudia Tenney, the former congresswoman for the New York 22nd District, so many, Marissa Hamilton out of Arizona, talking about women and guns, so many interviews, and covering, of course, Vice President Mike Pence and also President Donald Trump with their live speeches from the event. And so that was really great. But let me take a quick break. We'll come back. We'll talk a little bit more about the past. We'll talk a little bit about what's going on right now. Of course, we are always looking for your comments, your questions, your statements. This is about sharing time with you and how you're sharing your Memorial Day. So please do reach out to us. We're on the chat room. You can talk to us over at Facebook. You can talk to us on Twitter. We are looking at all of it. But most of all, we are happy to be here with you, spending our time in this holiday with you on our 200th episode of No Soundbites Allowed. And we're going to be right back in just a moment.
Sometimes a man is wrong. Oh, she took 5 steps. Oh, and she was stopped. Oh, it's one of those times. Oh, it's one of those times. She said, I know you ain't got a cheating heart. Oh, your love is true. You just gotta. She never gonna fall. Oh, it's gonna love this time. Oh, it's one of those times. It's one of those times. Oh, it's one of those times. Oh, that woman, she don't mean a thing. She just had eyes of fire in a heart so cold. One touch, lost control. Oh, it's one of those times. Oh, it's one of those times. road. Oh, she took 5 steps. Oh, she was gone. Oh, it's one of those times. Oh, it's one of those times.
Thank you.
Yes, I'm here with you folks, all right. And thank you again for being here with us at the Exceptional Conservative Network with our program, the No Soundbites Allowed podcast. By the way, you can see many of the programs here on the Exceptional Conservative Network, including Ken McClinton. He is a great patriot, and he's one of the president of the program, and he has his own show here. We do advise you to check that out, and Dr. Jane Ruby and so many others that are on this channel and network that you can check out with their thoughts from all across the country, from out in Maryland with Shannon and Mike Wright, who, and by the way, Shannon is running for the mayor of Baltimore. We've done an interview with her. Please do check out that interview and check out her show, The Right Way, WRIGHT Way. It's a great program, and so many others. Oh, it's just too much. But I do also want to say thank you to the Belmar Pub and to the Park Diner. They are my friends. This is not a paid advertisement. They are great. And if you are in the Binghamton area, especially during Memorial Day, drop on in to the Belmar Pub, to the Park Diner, say hello to my friends, and enjoy great food, great atmosphere, really good people. I enjoy them. I want you to check them out. I think you'll have a great time there. And I go there myself on a regular basis, which is why I mention it. Again, that's not paid. That's just me talking about my friends out there. And when I speak about my friends, I do also want to speak about what happened just yesterday. And part of the reason why the show's a little different than, well, a lot different than what I was looking to do for the 200th episode, because we were looking initially at having a lot of different things, but we went dark for a while. And when I say that, and when people say that in the media, what does it mean to be dark? Essentially, the lights were out. We didn't have internet. We were shut down for a little while. And that's because we're trying to hit a goal. And hopefully you can help us. We want to hit $5,000 is our goal. It helps us keep the lights on to be able to produce this show, to go to and from everywhere we need to get to. And it's hard to do that without your help. You make the difference. And our goal, we've gotten $90. I want to thank John Solak, Bob Murphy, Jared D., Ed Hickey. I should also add in there someone who's helped a lot with the show behind the scenes, Michael Woodward. And I want to thank, and also most especially, our very, very special supporter who yesterday, when everything got shut down on the internet, because it costs money to do all of this, thousands of dollars every year to produce this, and we're not a major media company. We don't get major advertising, which we would love to have, but we don't have that. And so we rely on your donations, and we had a special supporter who came in and helped us get the internet back on so we could do our 200th episode, to be able to continue to do this for you for this month. And so we thank them for that. But we have a goal. We want to hit that 90. We want to get to $5,000. Help us get there. Please just go and donate. It's a GoFundMe. Donate, whether it's $1, $5. If you want to be like, Bob Murphy, make it $50 or Ed, like $25. John Solak put in $10, but Jared put in $5. Anything and everything, it all helps. It all adds up. It helps us pay the bills for doing things like going to CPAC 2019, for doing the interviews and getting everyone set and keeping the internet live that we'd love to bring to you. And we want to get our internet, we want to get our email back on so that we can check on our emails and your comments by email to us, and to also set up some of our interviews. So please, anything you can do, it does make a difference. It does help. So with all that said and put to the side, and we're getting ready for our guest coming up in just a little while. That is Dr. Giovanni Scaringi, as I was talking about him before. I also want to just go into a little bit of something different. You guys are great. I don't know if everyone noticed that this was one of our biggest articles, one of our biggest YouTube interviews or interviews on YouTube. Context. I'm going to play that for you right now. Oops. Hold on. This is one of our bigger interviews that we had. This is with Fran Lebowitz calling the public dumb in as she was walking it back, her comments. And I got to tell you, folks, that this is a dangerous time in our nation.
And certainly he deserves to be impeached.
I keep doing that. Stop doing that. That's not a paid advertisement. Blah, blah, blah. Stop. This is, from our conversation about Fran Lebowitz. And I'm going to stop messing with that because I keep hitting it. But, America's under assault right now. And that's really troubling. That we see so many times people like Fran Lebowitz and Bill Maher and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Bernie Sanders and so many others who are out there saying that America is not great. Matter of fact, that was Governor Andrew Cuomo. America's never been great. What? Are you crazy? Look at his own family is a great example of the success story of America. Immigrants that came over, and in the next generation, he becomes mayor of New York. His father, second generation, his father gets to become mayor of New York. They're considered for the presidency. Whether or not that would be failed or not doesn't matter. They're in the contention for that. Multi-millionaires, brothers on national TV, news media. Is it nepotism? Probably, but doesn't matter. That's not the point. Look at the success they've had. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, a bartender who is now a member of Congress. Whether or not she's an idiot, and she is, doesn't really matter. You can, in America, go from being a bartender to a member of Congress. In America, you can go from being a community organizer to president. In America, you can succeed. And as much as people are trying to tell you, you can't, if you're listening to, Citizen Action, Progressive Leaders of Tomorrow, otherwise known as PLOT, if you're listening to Black Lives Matters, they're telling you about how you can't succeed in this nation, even though we have seen tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of individuals who have given their life and their blood to America, and they have proven you can succeed. You will succeed in America. And we have that proof. In 2019, we have that proof. It's very simple. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is a congresswoman. Doesn't matter if you like her, if you hate her. Like I said, I think she's an idiot. Doesn't matter. Because she was a bartender and she is now a congresswoman. And there is nowhere else in the world that I can point to where someone can make that much of a transition in their life. Where you can go from the lowest economic rung, well, she was never quite at the lowest, but from a lower economic class to a position of power, national power, influencing the direction of the nation. Where you can go from being a nobody to leader of the world, like President Obama. You can't do that in other nations. It's not possible to do that in other nations, but you can do it in America. And they want to tell me, I listen to these people, and they do this because of the blood and the sweat and the PTSD and the suffering of those who have served our nation and given the greatest of gifts. And to tell me or anyone that our nation is not great, they have no idea what they're talking about. But that doesn't mean our nation is perfect. That's why we have people like John Lind, and we have people like Bill de Blasio, Mayor Bill de Blasio, who is running for Congress, for the presidency, who thinks he's a great guy. He thinks he's somehow better than most and able to, I just don't even understand how to explain him. He's not liked in New York. 76% of people do not think he's a good politician, do not think he would be good as president, and he has a reportedly 0% standing in the national polling. 0 in the national polling. I do want to share that with you. Here it is. In the most recent polling across the nation. Oops, I got to fix this a little bit. Come on. Oh, wrong one. There. He's not even in there. He doesn't make it. He's 0. He's actually below Kirsten Gillibrand at her 0.7%. And she's doing miserable. She's on her way out of the race. She's doing so badly that, as we had discussed previously, Senator Cory Booker had to try and save her campaign in a very Machiavellian move to improve his standing. He wanted to save her. And guess what? Bill de Blasio doesn't even get that. He's nowhere on the mark. Even though he's rich. Possibly because he's a rich white man, but you can't really say that because so is Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders. Two very rich, white, old men. So Democratic Party says rich, old white men are the problem in America, and yet those are the people leading their party. I don't understand the confusion that goes on in the Democratic Party, where one side is saying one thing and then they do exactly. We see this all the time. They do one thing and they're saying one thing and they do another. Kind of like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And I still don't understand how this didn't get to be national news when she tweeted, in her own words, in the official Twitter for her, that, excuse me, that she considers anyone who believes her statements that the world will end in 12 years if we don't do the Green New Deal, that they have the social intelligence of a sea sponge. Now, first of all, I don't know what social intelligence is. I don't know how that's different than having intelligence, period. Again, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, I believe, in my personal opinion, is an idiot because she doesn't know what she's talking about, and she obviously didn't go to college for English. But that being said, she called her supporters, the kids, the 6th graders that went to go and see Dianne Feinstein, pleading with her to fight for the Green New Deal, the high school students that sat right across from me in the Binghamton Town Hall meeting for Anthony Brindisi in 2019 in February. And I was sitting with them, and those kids are sitting right across from me, asking Anthony Brindisi whether or not he's going to support a 70% tax rate to be able to support the Green New Deal, as he stumbled and said he didn't know how to answer the question, and in fact didn't answer the question. We have these kids who have been raised and taught that this is the most deadly, devastating thing that will ever happen in their lifetime, even though we have no proof of that physically in the world. But they're being told this day in, day out, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is the one telling them this, and she is also saying at the same time, this is a sarcasm and that it is not real. And if you believe that the 12-year limit is real, you are as dumb as a sea sponge. Wow. I just don't get that. It's amazing to me. And then we also have in the Democratic Party Speaker Nancy Pelosi mentioning that, confirming and saying she believes that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is out of her mind, and that constituents in the New York 14th District and some Democrats overall are as compliant and useless and dumb as a glass of water. And we've done episodes on this. We've shown you the video and the articles on this. So I'm just restating what's already been put out there. This is their words, covered by the major media, news media that is left-leaning. Not I very often on this program try to make sure that I'm not just focusing on right-leaning sources. I look at all of the media. I look at everything that's being said out there, and I find these sources from the left. It's so bad that even the left-leaning organizations can't hide that this insanity exists. And these are the people who are trying to destroy America. People who think that constituents are as smart as a glass of water, as compliant as a glass of water, that are as dumb as a sea sponge. I mean, that's Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And these are the people that some want to lead our nation, to lead the direction in the future of our nation. They have such little respect for the people. I don't know. I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that. And, we see that in the polling. Look at the most radical of these individuals, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, Andrew Yang, Senator Cory Booker, Beto, the fake Hispanic Beto O'Rourke, Robert O'Rourke, Pete Buttigieg, Kamala Harris, Senator Kamala Harris, Senator Elizabeth Warren, and of course, Senator Bernie Sanders. All of them are radical in their beliefs, radical in the things that they believe in. They want to throw you in jail. A bunch of these guys, and there's even more that aren't on this list, like Eric Swalwell. Eric Swalwell, Cory Booker, Pete Buttigieg, they're all happy with the idea of throwing, even Kamala Harris, they're happy with the idea of saying, well, if you have your Second Amendment, if you own a firearm, we'll throw you in jail if you keep it. We're going to take it away from you. Really? I'd like to see you try. There's a reason why there's a Second Amendment, and that is because we don't want to be Venezuela. But that's some of the things that are going on. And so in this 200th episode, while I'm not focusing on a issue, I'm focusing on where's our nation? Where is our nation? What are the thoughts that are going on? What's happening? Because our nation is in a transition. And we're always in a transition, to be honest. You hear that in every election cycle. This is the most important election. This is, this makes the difference. Our nation's going to change after this. And it's always true. It's always true. Our nation is changing, and we are always evolving. And it is always important for each election, because in each election, we keep seeing that we're moving further and further over the last 50 years, further and further to the left. We're seeing our nation slowly drift away from the Constitution, slowly drift away from our inalienable rights. Inalienable. Not human rights, which are given by government and can be taken by government and can be redefined by government. That's what Venezuela had. Venezuela had human rights. And those human rights did not include the ability to defend yourself from a corrupt government, that did not have the right to defend yourself from harm. They didn't believe in that. They said, government will take care of me. Government will be there. Well, government is running the public over and shooting them for years. 2 years ago, there were articles out about how they were 500 police officers running around the nation just shooting people. This isn't a new thing. It's been going on for a while. And that pales in comparison to the things that happened in North Korea or in China. Remember Tiananmen Square? This is what we get with the socialism. How do we get... That's why these elections are so important. Because when you don't pay attention to it, when you let these little things slide, then you get closer and closer to failing and becoming like these other failed nations. And yes, I will say, China, North Korea, Venezuela, Cuba, they're failed. The former Soviet Union crumbled, literally it's gone, because communism, socialism, they fail. They have always failed because they are inherently based on a very flawed methodology, and that they are based in control, which human beings will naturally fight against because we have inalienable rights that cannot be taken away by government. And when government tries human beings will resist, and we will succeed every single time. And I've said this over and over in many, many episodes. And you may disagree with me, and you can. Again, this is a conversation we're having. And you may think that something I'm saying is wrong. Tell me why. I'm open to hear that. But I have to tell you, when I have individuals that I'm listening to, like Fran Lebowitz, who is more than happy to go out there and say, hey, America is not great. When we have individuals who are like, when we're listening to Governor Cuomo, Andrew Cuomo, and others, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, when we're listening to them tell us how bad America is, I have a problem with that. When Fran Lebowitz is suggesting that we kill the president, how dare you? And that's something that if I had ever said, or if any conservative had ever said something like that about President Obama, there would be riots in the streets. The media would be losing its mind. But Fran Lebowitz says that we should kill the president. It's okay. When we hear Bill Maher say that he hopes and encourages that our economy were to crash, devastating hundreds of thousands of Americans' lives, just so that in his view, President Trump would not be reelected because of his political preference, that is dangerous. I mean, these people are literally on the edge of treason. They're talking about destroying our government, our social society, our society, our economic basis. They want to destroy lives because of their political preference, and your opinion doesn't matter. See, that's why I do this program, because it does matter. And whether there's dozens of people who are willing to speak out or just a couple, it's always important that we speak out. Always important that we speak out, because it makes the difference. Oops. Hang on, folks. Okay. And just to let people know, Gio has mentioned he's going to be here about 1:10, so no problem. We're looking forward to that. And kind of figured he might be a little bit late. It is the holiday weekend here. But it's very troubling. Truly, it is. To listen to people like this say, Fran Lebowitz out there saying that she wants to kill the president, hearing Bill Maher say and get applauded for saying that the economy should go into a recession or a depression for his political beliefs, to listen to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez say that people do not have the freedom or the right to live a life unless they live by her dictates, which means go back to the Middle Ages, to not be able to fly in planes, to take a train to Hawaii. I mean, that's just stupid. And why should we have to be, why do you have the right to impose your view on the rest of America just because you think you're right? What about the rest of us? Especially when you then turn around when no one's paying attention, or very few people are paying attention, and saying that, well, if you believe this, you're an idiot, that you're just a sea sponge. That's why we do this. You see, I know my audience out there. Not everyone, and this is true of most things with politics. Most people won't speak publicly. You'd be amazed how many times I have conversations with individuals privately or off the record. And they agree with me. They agree with you. But they don't want to say it publicly because everyone's afraid, what's going to happen? It costs money to get the message out there. And not everyone's going to say, yes, I agree with you. People are afraid to make comments. I was talking to a teacher just 2 days ago who is a conservative, but is afraid for their job to make a comment on Facebook. So instead they just read things on Facebook and won't comment. Otherwise they'll lose their job because the rest of their peers will attack them, because the union will attack them. That's sad. I was just on Wednesday, I was at my local city council meeting. And you know what happened in that city council meeting? We had union representative came in to watch the rest of his union workers as they attacked our local city council on an issue that was being misrepresented in large part. That was politicized to get a political message across because it was being taped without any concern about what the facts were. And we'll talk about that a little bit more with Dr. Giovanni Scaringi. But this is allowed because, well, they're progressives, they're unions, they're Democrats. And it's okay that they can make up allegations, that they can make wild, random statements that are erroneous. But it's okay because no one's paying attention. Because no one wants to speak out and say, you're wrong. I did. But you know what? They knew that I would be the only one there. They don't show up. I've been there all year. I'm not elected to any office. I go there all year long. And yet they still, over and over and over again, they just use people for their political gain. And that scares me. So it's okay to just watch the show. It's okay that if you want to say, Mike, I think you're wrong, say it. And it's okay to do that privately. But no matter what you do, please vote. Your voice is your vote. And it makes a massive difference. And it is all the difference. So let me take a quick break. I think Dr. Giovanni Scaringi is going to be with us in just a few moments. I want to get everything prepared for him and get a little more focused, perhaps, on some of the things that we're going to talk about here in the second half of our 2-hour program on No Soundbites Allowed. Please remember, we are on Tuesdays, Thursdays at 1 p.m., Saturdays from 12 noon till 2. You are always welcome to make comments, whether it's on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter, or in our chat room, and let us know what you think, because this is always a conversation with you, always. And we want to talk about so many things, and I can't cover everything myself. There may be something you want to talk about, and I'll be happy to do so. But we'll be right back in just a moment with a little bit more of the program. Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us here at the No Soundbites Allowed podcast. Let me say that better. No Soundbites Allowed podcast. I am your guest and your host. I'm your host, Michael Voss, the Dragon of the Southern Tier. And I'm here with one of my great guests on the program. And this is Dr. Giovanni Scaringi. And I'm going to show him, here's our a little image of us from back in, I think it was 2015, as we were talking about the Front Street Gateway project, a renovation for low and modified low-income housing, one of several events that we've spoken about together. But more importantly, folks, let me show you. This is Dr. Giovanni Scaringi.
Looking really bad on a Saturday afternoon with a hat and a cup of coffee.
Well, you know, it's that kind of day. It's raining outside, by the way, folks.
It is.
And so he's been gracious enough to come in and talk with us and it's also Memorial Day weekend. So, I mean, you got to have some time to give people the chance to relax. And that's what I like about this program. I prefer you to be relaxed and just have a conversation.
Absolutely. It's good to be back. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm so happy to have you here. Folks, just to cover a little ground from the past to today, when we first spoke, it was back in your campaign.
Yeah, 2015.
2015, we were speaking about your plan to run. At the time, you were a professor at SUNY Broome, and you had made the decision to become a politician running for the city council seat in Binghamton, New York. And a lot has changed since then, and that's why...
Very much.
One of the things, you're now Doctor, and that's why I put it in there. Dr. Giovanni Scaringi. And by the way, folks, if we've spoken to each other many, many years now, so I call him Gio. And
For sure it works.
yeah. And so if you hear me say Gio all of a sudden, that's just...
That's all it is.
Yeah.
Informal is best.
You tend to be informal most of the time.
Yeah. I've never been one for titles.
Although you earned it.
Yeah. I mean, you work hard, and you have your family and your friends, and around you that support you, and you do what you got to do.
Absolutely, and you do it well.
Try to. Appreciate it.
There's no question about the success. You're a homeowner. You're a professor. You're at SUNY. You're at Binghamton University as well as SUNY Broome in your classes. You're looking at re-election, which up until about 2 days ago was completely unopposed.
Yeah, we had did a pretty progressive push throughout the petition period, but if you read the New York State election law, I believe the deadline is next Tuesday, actually May 28th at by 5 p.m. If someone wants to, they can collect signatures to actually create. It's what's called an independent petition. To actually create your own political party line. And I've always been about ballot access. And if someone goes out and gets those signatures properly, the more, the better.
Yeah. Well, it's never bad to give people choice.
Absolutely.
That's one of the things I always promote here, that no matter what you believe politically, whether you agree with me or not, I don't care. Go out and vote, because your voice is your vote. And if you're not voting, you have no voice.
That's right.
So, and we can't improve things if we don't all get our voice out there and vote.
Absolutely.
Although I have to say that in my experience, in what I see in the community and my personal experience, you should slam dunk this, but
never hold. Service is a privilege. It's not a job. It's not a right. And you've got to earn it every time, and so that's what we're going to set to do out this year. And if we win, we'll be honored to serve another 4 years, as we have term limits in the city of Binghamton, which I personally think is a good thing.
Yes.
And if we don't, that's okay. We can take pride in what we've done over the last 4 years and assist with whoever the new councilman or councilwoman-elect would be, and help with that transition, and then move forward.
I want people to know, this isn't just rhetoric, because I hate rhetoric. That's why it's called No Soundbites Allowed. We don't do rhetoric here. And people should know, even without a opponent in the race, you've been out, twice now to every single member of your constituency.
We've already been knocking on doors since... For your listeners who may not know, there were some election changes that Albany undertook this year, starting in mid-January, I think, somewhere around there.
Mid-January.
And one of them was that the primary day, forgive me, due to a court case a few years ago, we had a federal primary that was in June, and then we had state and local primaries that were in second Tuesday in September.
Right, and that's statewide.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's correct, regardless of whether anything that's state or municipal. And what they did was they actually combined those two primaries, but not into the September one like it used to be a few years ago. They actually combined them into the June one. So the petition process to get on the ballot obviously would have to be done prior to primary day at a bare minimum, besides the general election. So by moving primary day, that was normally or traditionally in September, to June, that would require obviously the petition process to be moved up as well. So this year was from February 26th through April 4th, I believe it was.
Yes.
So yeah, so we've been knocking on doors since mid-February.
Yeah.
So.
And I've talked about that process and the fact that it was done very much so by the single party leadership of the state of New York, all Democrats, because they wanted to help New York City, where you can go from one building to another in the middle of February in New York. And for people who don't know New York, especially upstate New York weather, you're talking about snow, you're talking about single digit, if not lower temperatures, not including wind chill, 2-3 feet of snow for much of the state. So, while it's great in New York City to go from one building with, 500 people to another building with 1,000 people, in upstate New York, you're trying to travel, either walk or drive through 2 feet of snow in, frigid Arctic conditions.
Yeah, I will.
It's crazy.
I will say, for someone like myself who loves the beach and just loves to kind of lay out and get a nice tan, it definitely was a change going from slacks and a polo to very thick gloves, hand warmers, and a really big hat. But you push through, you do what you got to do. You got to work within the system, and you get it done.
Yeah, and you are. I gotta say, and I thank you for joining me here on the 200th episode.
I was about to say, congratulations, 200. Wow.
Yeah,
that's a milestone right there.
Been pushing, and it's incredible. And I should probably mention, for people who don't know about this, if you look at the count on the podcast, they'll say 239. That's because that includes the SUNY Broom Republicans podcast,
okay,
which I also pushed out here. But for no Soundbites Allowed, it's 200 exactly.
Congratulations.
But there's been so much, and you were the first politician, elected official that I had on the show. Since then, we've had Democrats, progressives, conservatives, libertarians, Larry Sharp as an example.
Mm-hmm.
Many people, Donna Lapardo, who's an assemblywoman, county executive Jason Garnar, who's a county executive, obviously, though they're Democrats. So we've had everyone on the program.
That's good.
But they took their lead from you.
If anybody's following me, that's scary. Stay back.
No. They're great because he did such a great job. It's one of them. It's one of our top interviews on the program since we've been doing it in all 200 episodes, and we've had, I don't know, 2/3, half of all the programs have interviews.
Oh wow!
And so you've been right there at the top. What's changed? Let me ask you, what's it like to be a politician? Let's start there.
Again, I love the title of the podcast. Personally, I hate the term politician, but I'm not going to hide behind it. I've kind of a little bit more of a traditionalist in that sense. I long for the days where we used to call people public servants, but more importantly, people who served in those roles actually lived by that credo. And unfortunately, we don't see that a lot today. But being in elected office, it's an eye opener. It is, coming from someone with a private sector background and now being in the public sector and higher education, government, municipal government is kind of a whole entourage in and of itself. In New York State, as I'm sure you and many of your listeners are very well aware, is a unique animal unto itself. But our goal, and I always try to speak in the plural because you never do something on your own. It always starts with the individual, but you work with people to get things done. I've always been there's a very important interconnectivity there. I've always been shocked at people who say that it takes a village to raise a child.
Yeah.
Because I've always told people that that's a half truth. It is true. It does take a village to raise a child, but it takes individuals to make a village.
True.
And, it all starts with individuals making those choices, and then working as a collective group. But you always have, the largest minority in the United States is the individual.
True.
And, that should always be the basis of everything. But being in elected office more specifically, it's humbling. It's incredible. It can be chaotic at times. You walk into that building, you walk into that chamber, and, you always have to remember, at least as it relates to the city of Binghamton, you're representing essentially, very broadly, 1/7 of about 46,000 people, and it's my mindset is always, when you walk through that door, you hang your coat, you hang your hat, and you also have to hang your ego and your personal beliefs. If you, I always tell people, if you get elected to office, regardless of the capacity, and you serve a 2-year term, a 4-year term, a 6-year term, whatever it might be, if you go through that entire term and are content, as a legislator at least, with every single vote you've ever taken, you are doing something incredibly wrong.
See, a lot of politicians don't look at it that way, and I love, because you're highlighting some things like being humble. And I know you. We've had many conversations off the record and separately, individually, where I know some of the thoughts you have on some issues, and I have watched you bite your tongue on the passion that you have for an issue.
Yeah.
And rather than as a person, as an individual, that you tame that down and to be able to properly represent, and in some cases even not necessarily your opinion, but the one of your constituents, you present that separate of, let me go out here and just, we've seen many politicians, especially locally, who've gone out there and they just berate, they make accusations, they've allegations, and they showboat.
Sure.
And they stand on a soapbox and spend the time of elected office to be able to promote a very specific ideology. And in our region, I know we have a lot of people who watch this around the world, but in our region of the southern tier of New York, we've seen them, many of them from the progressive left, like Citizen Action, progressive leaders of tomorrow, or otherwise known as PLOT, Black Lives Matters. These are my statements in understanding it.
Of course.
But they represent these very fringe left groups, and they use their time to stand on a soapbox and promote these ideas, which aren't the views of their constituents per se. And I love the fact that you've been humble enough not to. You don't follow that lead. You don't do that.
Yeah, because it's at the end of the day. I mean, it happens on the left. It happens on the right.
It does happen on the right.
At the end of the day, it's rhetoric. It's garbage. It's at the expense of getting somewhat biblical sounding. It's a tree that bears no fruit. You can say whatever you want. I can say whatever I want, but at the end of the day, what actions follow those words that actually carry some weight, so to speak? And I think it's also important to remember, I personally, I have certain opinions and positions on, policies, X, Y, and Z. Yeah, I mean, everybody has those things, and that's good, right? But I can even remember.
This is going to be good, folks.
No, it's funny, when to not get ideological, but just to provide an ideological example. I remember back in 2015, we were knocking on doors. There was one day I was at one particular door on the northern part of the district that I represent, and had a great conversation with this very, very nice lady, and met her husband, and they were very kind, invited me inside. We had a cup of coffee. I looked down at my watch, and before I knew it, oh my goodness, 40 minutes had gone by. And she was very kind, very supportive, and it was actually the first time we'd ever met. And I asked her if I could put a lawn sign on her lawn. She said, yeah. And I was very appreciative, and her and her husband were very supportive. And coming into 2016, with the presidential election and things like that, I drove by her house one day on my way to work, and she had a Bernie Sanders lawn sign on her front lawn. And I said to myself, I said, my goodness, I said, I never would have expected that someone who had supported a senator such as Senator Sanders would, publicly
a raving socialist,
support me. And the reason why I use that example is not to bite off anything on myself, but I think that it's important for us people in office to remember that you are going to get those days, particularly when you are a legislator, but even if you're an executive, you're going to get those people that, may be on the opposite aisle of you, or on the other side of the political spectrum, whatever it might be. And we've lost the ability to just talk to people. That's the reason why I use that example that I did. And what we tried our best to do, what I tried my best to do, was to just follow that simple premise. People are a collection of their, how they were raised, their environment, their belief systems, their past experiences, their current life situations, and at the end of the day, I mean, it sounds incredibly corny, but, we are more similar than we are different
on almost every issue.
Yeah. And, if you can break through that, you all of a sudden realize that, at the end of the day, myself included, most people in the world are just, they want to be happy. They just want to do well. Most people are
want to live a peaceful, regular life.
Yeah. Moderate means, middle class houses and, middle class lives and things like that. And, we have to be cognizant and be supportive and helpful of everyone as much as we can be. But at the same on the same token, we also have to remember that there is self-identification and individualism, and you as an individual are responsible for the choices that you make. I hear this rhetoric in student loan debt, for example, all the time, and people look at me like I'm crazy when I say this. My student loan debt is my debt. I made that choice.
Yeah.
I will pay it back. You shouldn't have to. That's not your job. It's just things like that. But at the end of the day, you gotta respect people's opinions and work with them as best as you can.
Well, I think so. And I think it's very important what you said about having that responsibility, about having that openness. Mm-hmm. We don't always see that. I mean, and you're right, I've had many conversations, almost always off the record for some reason, with people who are either pundits or advocates or elected offices from the left, the right, the center. A lot of people who will have one conversation with me, and we've literally gone over issues and had a great conversation about a controversial issue.
Sure.
And at the end of the day, we can agree on some certain core benefits or beliefs. And then I go, okay, you want to come on and say that? No.
Yeah, well, that's
it's like,
that's the thing.
But we can get a compromise. We've had this discussion, and people don't believe this all the time, but I've had conversations with people on the fringe left or libertarians or even extreme on the right, where I'm having a conversation and maybe I don't always agree with them, or we're having a discussion, and we can get to a point where it's like, okay, but we have a compromise.
Sure.
Here's where we could meet midway. And I'm like, well, this is what we should talk about. Come on the program. No, I can't do that.
Yeah, the problem in politics today, and truthfully, that's such a cliche thing to say. The politics today, it's always been like this.
Well, there's always been a division.
Yeah, it's one of those things. It's always been mind-boggling to me that people think that what you can compromise and work on and your fundamental principles are mutually exclusive concepts. I've never understood that. I've never understood the idea that, as it relates to policy X, my principal beliefs are thing 1 and your principal beliefs are thing 2, but things 3 and 4, there's commonality there.
Right.
And if you get to the point where you can't even sit across the table if 1 and 2 can't sit across the table and at least only discuss 3 and 4, there's something incredibly wrong with the body politic at that point.
If we know that we're absolutely never, I like to use the example of the Second Amendment. Okay, so you're completely on the idea of no one should have a gun, and I'm on the point of view of basically everyone should. Let's throw those two things out and let's walk in the middle here and say, okay, what about this? Because we want everyone to be safe. What principles, what ideas can we take from throwing those two things out? What else can we talk about that makes people safe? Let's have that conversation.
Sure.
Because, I'm not changing my point of view. I'm not going to try and change your point of view. So let's throw them out.
Yeah.
And let's actually just focus on, okay, what can we do that we're not going to kill each other over?
True, yeah, but for what it's worth, I'll swing it around the other end too, which is that this is something that, in my particular opinion, people who in the broader philosophical sense of founding principles and the Constitution and things like that. In my opinion, we've actually done a horrible job over the last 10 to 20 years of attempting to communicate why we assert what we do.
Yes, we go with soundbite. That's because we have this, and that's why the show's no soundbites.
Right.
We've become a soundbite culture.
Correct.
Here's the headline in 140 characters. Here's 30 seconds of news coverage of a 4-hour event. Or you're on radio, on TV. Interviews are one sentence. You'll get one sentence of video. Of coverage. It's like, well, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, absolutely.
We were so much more than that, and there's so much more we're talking about. That's why I like this format.
Right.
You get to talk.
Absolutely.
So I agree with you. In the last 20 years, we've reduced it to so much into that meaningless soundbite that all the real content and the real discussion that goes with it, gone. It's eliminated.
Yeah, no, we've, in my opinion, we've horrifically failed at creating sound, principled arguments as to why the individual is the most fundamental tenet of the United States. As it relates to things like, I'll use an example. What's a hot button issue that they're talking about in national politics now?
One?
Here we go. The Electoral College.
Oh God,
right?
Yes.
This is always a great example, right? So people who advocate for the abolition of the Electoral College, in my opinion, if you assert the following idea, they say something like this. I heard Mayor Pete say this at a
Buttigieg.
Mayor
Pete Buttigieg.
Buttigieg. Forgive me if I'm mispronouncing his last name.
I probably am.
Yeah. Seems like a very nice guy. And I saw this. Someone had tweeted this video of him saying something like this. He said, if we're going to call the United States, if we're going to call ourselves a democracy, then it only makes sense, and I'm paraphrasing, that the election for the highest office in the land, assumably the presidency, should be by popular vote, and everyone gets a vote. And if you read the Constitution, if you read the Federalist Papers, if you look at history in the most objective manner you possibly can, for you to or for anyone rather, to articulate that type of point, that logically leads me to a couple of potential conclusions, right? Either number one, you just genuinely believe that, and that's okay, you have the right to, but as it relates to what you're substantively getting at, you have no idea what you're talking about.
Right.
Number two, you are using ideology to push something.
Yes.
Or number three, you are just, and I say this in the denotative sense, you are ignorant to what the Electoral College actually is.
And I think it's all three.
In some cases, it may be, and again, it's not a left or right thing because you see this on both sides, but
yes.
It's so overwhelmingly incredible to me. When I teach public policy courses, one of the questions I often ask my student, it's kind of really corny, but you never hear this question a lot. Why is the name of our country the United States of America? What the verbiage means something,
Very much
right?
so. Right.
Context means something. When you read the Constitution, the unit of analysis is not the nation.
Never.
It's not. It is the state.
Yes.
And the way to think of the Electoral College behind the whole, the extent to which of the actual process itself, right? The based upon the apportionment after the census every 10 years, right? A state that, you have this many seats in the House plus 2 senators, so you get, X number of Electoral College votes, right? So in New York, for example, right, we have every state has 2 senators. We have 27 House districts, 27 and 2. We get 29 votes, right? Bam, and it's done. The presidency, the office of the presidency, even as it's laid out in Article 2, is not an institution or an office, if you will, that is to almost kind of say, the purveyor of the entire land, right? The idea is that because the state is the unit of analysis, right? The federal government is only to exist to do certain things, right?
Very limited.
Correct, and we refer to those as enumerated powers, right? And I believe there's 30 something. Article 1, Section 8 is what's popping in my mind, but. Outside of that, you read the 9th and the 10th Amendments respectfully, right? That allow for enumeration, and then then states' rights, right, being handed down to the states and the people, right? The point of the Electoral College is to ensure that someone who runs for the office of the presidency is not elected by popular vote.
Yes.
That's the whole point.
It's supposed to be
you can almost
separate.
It almost sounds kind of weird, but you can almost think of it in this sense, right? On election day, every 4 years in an even numbered year, when the presidency is up for quote unquote election, so to speak, right? You can almost think of it in a sense of there are 50 states that are holding statewide elections for the office of the presidency. And based upon those majority totals in those respective states, they are then weighted in the Electoral College, and then with the 270 plus 1, right, or 270 rather, then that person has won the majority of the Electoral College, and that person takes office, right? And even if you think about it, President Trump is what? He's 45, right?
Yeah.
So we've had 45 presidents. all of which won, right? FDR served either 1 or 2 terms. That was blanket started by, President Washington back, 2 terms, and I'm done. I'm going back to the farmhouse and, living regular person living out my days. And he set that standard all the way through. People who attempted a third run, people like, Teddy Roosevelt, Ulysses S. Grant, they never got that third term.
Scared people.
Well, yeah. I think we kind of naturally have that idea of, limitation in that sense is
not for Congress.
Yeah, but limitation in that sense is not inherently a bad thing, right? I mean, the idea of the citizen legislator is gone, but the, again, bringing it back to that, you can port all these ideas back and forth, but again, if you're not coming from a place of understanding what something is as it was deemed and as it was established, you're already...
And what the whole purpose, what's the underlying purpose and cause.
Exactly.
And I think that's important because most people miss that. We aren't, first of all, we're not a democracy. We say that all the time,
right,
but we're not.
Right.
And so fundamentally, if you're saying, well, we need democratic elections, you're fundamentally wrong. That's just a fact.
As it relates to the residents.
In our elections. That's
correct, right.
That is fundamentally wrong. And there is a fundamental, absolute reason why we're not supposed to be.
Correct.
Which is to benefit the people via the states.
Right.
So that we get representation. Because, again, what was the whole point of the whole thing? We weren't getting representation. We wanted representation for the people. That's why we broke away from England, and that's what they wanted to ensure. The people would always have representation,
sure,
not mob rule or singular rule.
Right. And in research, it's what's referred to as the tyranny of the majority. Right. So, for example, if we lived in a true absolute majority democracy, right, tomorrow morning, at 9 a.m., if a referendum goes out, and 51% of the population says, that whole free speech thing, we don't need it, right? What happens to those inalienable rights that the 49%, right, the numerical minority, what happens to their rights? Do they just go out the window and exit stage right because the 51% said, we're good to go. Have a nice day, and that's the whole idea.
Well, see, I love this because when we start talking, we start getting in deep, which are conversations we should have,
sure, in
the nation, and remember and understand why we're having these conversations, why we have the ability to have these conversations, especially over a Memorial Day weekend.
Correct.
I'm going to switch gears, though.
Sure.
Because I'm going to ask you a question that everyone on the internet is waiting for. Everyone is waiting for this. So is that enough of a build-up for it?
Sure, yeah, why not? Bring it on. I'm an open book.
Okay. How'd you like the ending of Game of Thrones?
So you are actually, and all of your listeners are going to think I am crazy. I am proud enough to say that I am a card-carrying member of the 0.0001% of the population that has literally never seen one full episode of Game of Thrones.
Your life is just missing so much.
It's funny actually because people who know me,
I see you as a Tyrion guy. I'm a Tyrion guy.
People have said to me, "This is a show that you would love," and when I say, I chose my words very specifically there because if I had said I never watched Game of Thrones, I would actually be lying. I saw probably about 20 to 30 minutes of the first episode, and I don't know what it was. I couldn't.
Oh, it's slow.
I couldn't get into it. I couldn't, and it's funny actually because I tried it a second time, and I think the second time I got through maybe 2/3 of the first episode. I just
See, the trick is
and this is what everybody says. The first few episodes are slow.
First
you
three
gotta,
episodes, yeah.
you gotta get into it. And maybe if I had done the right thing and watched a few more, I would have gotten hooked. But yeah, I have literally, I have never seen one full episode, and I've only seen about 75% of literally season 1, episode 1. That was it.
See, if you ever make it past that, the first 3 episodes are slow. It is, although it's a lot of political intrigue, and I like that. Although I also like action, like John Wick 3 and all that. But once you get past that, and the first 4 seasons, you'll love. I truly believe it. After that, it's just downhill, and the season finale was just crap.
That's what I've been reading on Twitter.
Oh God, it's so bad. You can tell the difference between the writers when they had source material,
sure,
and when they didn't. It's like source material, rich, deep world building, intriguing characters. Tyrion, brilliant. Varys, brilliant. Littlefinger, brilliant. These are key characters. These are like the key political, deep thinking characters with webs going all the way through, planning plots and everything.
No, and HBO has put out some good shows. I mean,
they have
Boardwalk Empire. I'm a huge fan of that show.
That one I didn't see.
Yeah, so that's a good one. I think a few of the seasons are actually up on Amazon Prime if you have a membership. Sopranos obviously is a classic. Well, I shouldn't say classic, but I mean they make great stuff. I don't know what it was. I'm a huge Marvel fan.
So you saw Endgame.
Yeah,
I mean everyone saw Endgame.
Yeah, and I'm not gonna lie, I was not impressed.
I was less impressed than Infinity War.
Infinity War, believe it or not, is actually my favorite. And oddly enough, for some strange reason, like there's a bunch of little scenes and stuff, but I actually, believe it or not, just the other night, I was with a few friends, and we rewatched Age of Ultron. And you can actually see how the directors, who's John and Anthony Russo, I think, did a great job with the whole thing. But there's all these like little things throughout Ultron that I didn't pick up necessarily then, but now that I've seen Endgame,
little tales, little tells about where we're going.
Yeah, so it was, but I have to say,
Captain America. America. You know what? I will give Endgame this. Spoilers. If somehow you haven't seen it yet, spoilers. Captain America with Thor's hammer, Mjolnir. Because you knew, and I'm an old school comics guy. Yes, I'm one of those nerd geeks. He's held the hammer before, and in Ultron.
Yep.
You see him.
There was that one scene where he like kind of snugged it up,
where he didn't look like he was pulling it all that hard. He wasn't trying.
I noticed that actually when I was rewatching it again with a few of my friends.
Everyone else is like, okay, we're gonna try. He's just like, he's playing along with everyone else.
Sure, totally.
And when he plays, and he's just like gave it a little tug, and it moved, and Thor just goes, uh-oh.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I wasn't surprised when I saw, but it was a great scene, just seeing him standing there with the shield.
And picking it up, oh yeah.
And doing damage.
Yeah.
Probably, and I actually have a screensaver of it too, because it is my favorite shot in Endgame. Is Captain America with a broken shield, standing up there, and they do the wide, and all you see is him, the sun behind him, and Thanos and his army all coming at him, and he's like, "Yeah," and you know that wide.
Oh
shot?
yeah, totally.
I have that as a screensaver.
That's cool.
That's is cool. A beautiful shot.
That sounds nice.
So well done. The rest of it, and you could throw out Captain Marvel. That's my own thing. It's why she's in it. It's too OP all the way. It's so overpowered.
Yeah, it was. Yeah,
she ruins it for me. And the all-girl shot, because it was the all-girl shot.
Which one was that?
When they get all the female characters and they all happen to come together all at once in this massive battlefield, and they just by accident happen to all come together to rush forward for girl power.
I don't remember that.
It's all.
You're actually. I'll tell you and your listeners a little secret. I actually, believe it or not, this is how much of a fan of Endgame I wasn't. So myself and a friend of mine, we saw Endgame opening night. You probably think I'm crazy, but I actually fell asleep.
I'm not surprised. It's 3 hours, man.
No, it wasn't the length of the movie. So that scene opens, Hawkeye's there with his family, and then the wife and the kids, Thanos snaps his fingers, and and everybody disintegrates, and that was really cool. And then I remember, they find Thanos. Thor comes over with the whop. The head comes off, and maybe 10 to 15 minutes after that, I was out. I actually went 3 or 4 days later to go see Endgame again because I literally saw only like 15 or 20 minutes of the beginning and like the last 10 minutes. And I woke up like I couldn't believe because I'm not like that. I'm not a nap person. I sleep 5 hours a night and I'm good to go. But I just couldn't.
It's because you're young.
Yeah. But I don't know. Doesn't beat Infinity War, but that's just my opinion.
Let me tack on, and we got about 9 minutes.
Sure.
So let me get to. I want to ask something serious.
Sure.
A serious thought. I know that in City Council. Actually, one question I had. This is a quick one, because I don't get to ask this often enough of elected officials.
Sure.
Did it happen to you, or are you aware of any elected official who has suddenly had their IQ increase because they won an election?
I think there's a lot of people that think that happens.
That's my point. Yeah. People always think, well, they must be smart. They got elected. It's like, no, I talked to them before and after. They're just the same. They didn't get smarter or know anything more because they got elected. But, figure it out. But no, back to the serious. In City Council in Binghamton, New York, upstate New York, there's been a lot of issues, two big issues, and I know there's not enough time because we talk about too many other things.
Sure.
Ethics and serving the people.
Sure.
Ethics, I know of, hello, Dan, I see you, and I hear everything. You too, Conrad. I know what happened Friday.
I have no idea.
By the way, Dan is Dan Livingston. He's a councilman. Conrad Taylor is a councilman. I know them. I've spoken with them. And they were at an event on Friday, and there was a reprimand that happened because of it, because they took power into their own hands. And I have sources. I find out things.
I worked on Friday.
So there is a question of ethics that has been going on since 2019, beginning of the year. What do you believe? How important is ethics in elected officials for someone being elected and in serving the public? How important is their ethics?
It's everything. It's everything. I mean, that even comes out of being an elected official, right? That's just,
you would think.
Yeah, I mean, nobody's perfect, myself included. Oh, Lord knows I'm not.
Well, no, there's an understanding of what you don't know.
Yeah,
you don't know.
Sure. Yeah, you learn over time, and I mean, I'm by term, if you will, I'm still technically a freshman legislator. I've never held office before this, so. I've always believed that individuals are lifelong learners, and you learn and you go, and when you make a mistake, you gotta own up to it and try to correct it, and then you move on. Obviously, of course, there's the severity of the mistake or the severity of the issue. I mean, that's arguably infinite in its possibilities, but it's everything. Ethics is everything.
I bring that up because I see there have been local issues since January of 2019. I reported some of them. There's been state, federal level, and actually state and federal and presidential issues with ethics, all in 2019.
Sure.
Literally, I can point out a case of an ethics violation or of some degree. And in every single one of those cases, I've seen that we're really not seeing anything follow through, except for now on the present, where there is no absolute, it's been resolved, and yet we're still following through on that. That's the only one where it's actually being followed up, but that's a corrupted system itself. But every other case, no one's following up on it. It's just, here's the news, let it die. And that troubles me, and I always wonder, does that trouble the other politicians privately, whether or not you say something publicly? And I know some people do, and some people have,
Sure,
on various issues. But do people go behind the scenes, going, this is a problem, you got to fix that?
Yeah, I mean, with a very broad brush, right?
And we're talking broadly. I'm not picking on anyone.
No, totally. Broadly, obviously, it's very situational. Notwithstanding what may be, what laws, rules, policies, or regulations may impact situation X at any given time. You might be less okay with something than I am or I'm not, right? So, with the broadest brush, rather, that I possibly can. But yeah, I mean, when instances come up like that, when possible, which should be, at least in my mind, as much as possible, you want to get those things out there, and you want to correct them, and then make them right, and then move forward. Sure.
Okay. You don't hear that. No one ever asks. And it's something I think it's important, because no one really ever asks about that anymore in interviews or to understand. And really, we're spending this time understanding.
Sure.
Both you as the person and also you as the politician, because they go hand in hand.
Yeah,
you can't have one without the other.
Yeah, they're intertwined, of course. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I think that's important. And that's why I like about this show, that we try and get both of those aspects, so we get a better understanding of what's going on and how we're being led and represented. We've got about 3 minutes.
Sure.
And so, as always, I always like to end every interview with the question of, is there something that, and I know there's things we didn't get to, we actually had intended to talk about a very specific issue.
And we talked about Marvel for 5 minutes.
Yeah. We wanted to talk about 7 Hawley Street, and I know, and you're always welcome to come back or to call in and be on the program at any time.
Would love to.
But taking the last few minutes here, is there something that you wanted to come across or to express while we had the opportunity, not just to the local audience, but to the national and international audience?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, as it relates to the local audience, at least for the for the residents that I represent, thank you for the honor and the opportunity to get to serve you over the last 3.5 years now. It's been, and finishing out 4, and we'll push forward, and if we get a second term, great, and we'll keep doing over the next 4 years what we've done over the preceding 4. More broadly, have fun this weekend, relax, take some time to, enjoy family and friends, but just in the back of your mind, remember why we have this weekend, right? Memorial Day is, I'm not sure why, but Memorial Day and Veterans Day, for some reason, their existence often gets, I don't know if it's the right word is misplaced or something mixed together. Right? But Memorial Day is specifically for those who have lost their life in service to their country. Those are our better angels, right? Those are the people who really gave all. So, enjoy, relax, be proud of what you have, and the fact that there are quite literally spouses who don't have someone sleeping next to them tonight, for your ability to continue to have that. And that would probably be the one thing that I would just want to remind.
Actually, that's where I started the show, and that's actually going to be the last thing I'm going to end the show with. Is there's this great picture of someone writing on a whiteboard with what is the difference between Armed Forces Day, Veterans Day, Memorial Day.
Right.
And exactly what you just said, and it's actually where I started the show, and it's where I'm going to end the show. That'll be the last thing that people will be able to see on this screen for the episode, because I think you're right, it is vital and important that we talk about that and remember that, because I started off the show pissed off about John Lind, the American Taliban, and ranting a little bit about it, I suppose. But it is something important to remember and always to keep in our minds, because it is so important. And on that, folks, I do want to bring that up, and I will also say to you, I want to thank you for joining us. We've been here for 2 hours, and I want to thank you, W. Allen McD, for even creating and having this image up on Facebook so people can see what the differences are of those days. I want to thank everyone for joining us here on No Soundbites Allowed in our 200th episode. I think everyone's had a great time with it. I've enjoyed it, especially having our special guest, Dr. Giovanni Scaringi, my good friend Gio, in with us. Our first guest, our 200th guest, and he will be on many times in between and going forward. But otherwise, folks, enjoy the holiday, be well, and we will be back here on Tuesday at 1 p.m. speaking with you, because you are the best audience I could possibly have.
Happy Memorial Day. God bless.
Happy Memorial Day. Bye-bye.